Where'd you get your cup? Easy. Password. Plug in mine like about 3 or 4 times.
That's the reminder to turn off your phone.
The meeting is starting. Turn your phones off.
We're ready. It's really fun.
Probably the appropriate song. Brand new one. Brian Eichert.
Can you guys hear me?
No, that's not on.
This one is.
Hello?
There we go. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our meeting. It is a little bit after 10. We're very happy to be here, and we will call our meeting to order at 10:02. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I haven't asked anybody to do that, so I will lead it, if everybody could stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and we will proceed with the roll call.
Lucas Narducci,
Here.
Dr. Daniel Cord,
Here.
Superintendent Hoffman,
I'm here.
Member Baker.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Member Broussard,
I'm here.
Member Burton. Here. Dr. Chang. Member Kay.
Present.
Member Mack. Here. Member Ruiz.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Director Williams. We will go on to the presentation of candidates and election of State Board of Education officers for 2020. Director Williams?
Members of the State Board of Education, the nominating committee met this morning to prepare a slate of candidates for the roles of president and vice president. Members Burton, Kay, and Ruiz prepared the slate of Lucas Narducci as president and Dr. Daniel Cord as vice president. Prior to passing out the paper ballot, are there any slates from the floor? Hearing none, Jessica will pass out the slate ballots. Members who are on the phone, you've been provided a slate ballot by email. Please complete that ballot and email it to myself and Jessica. Each member will mark their selection and initial their ballot. I will then tally the votes. Members on the phone, if you could email me your votes, please.
In the interim, while we're waiting for the votes, it's off schedule. This is not on my agenda or anything, so this is not the president's report. I just want to say, she's shaking her head. We're very glad to be here. We decided last year that we wanted to have the board meetings in a couple of different locations around the state, because since we are a state board, and staying in Maricopa County just didn't seem to serve the purpose. And so this year we have at least 2 meetings around the state, one here and then one in Flagstaff, which will be back-to-back with our retreat, and hopefully next year we'll expand it to a couple of more locations. This way we can involve people wherever we're, since we affect the whole state. And so we're very happy to be here. Very lucky to have Dr. Kaur, not only as a friend, but on our board to actually make this facility available and have this meeting today. And appreciate everybody being here. As soon as we get the vote in, then we'll move on with the agenda. Because right now, without a president and vice president, this board wouldn't know what to do. We did say that if we didn't get the election, that we'd just move to a different chair and someone move here and everything would go on exactly the same, so.
I think the pay is same. The same, yeah.
Yeah. What is the foundation, a charitable organization?
Members of the board, by a vote of 10-0, Lucas Narducci has been selected as president and Dr. Daniel Kaur has been selected as vice president by a vote of 10-0.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the time put into that. We'll now move on with agenda items, and before I do that, I just say we appreciate working with all the board members. It really is, in my mind, this board is fantastic. Everybody brings to the table something different and concerns involving the entire school system and K through 12. And we really complement one another and work. I think we all work well with everybody on the board as well as off the board, and that has been our goal for several years. And so I very much appreciate everything that everybody does. It's a time commitment, but it's enjoyable working with everybody on this board. With that, we'll move to the president's report. And since I'm here with Dr. Kaur, and this is his home of the land of the Matadors, I am actually going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, President Narducci. And to my fellow board members, welcome to Yuma and Arizona Western College. Today really is a very proud day for Yuma. We are not only hosting the State Board of Education for what we believe to be the first time in Yuma. I know it's been held outside of Maricopa County before, but at least for the first time in memory, to have this board come to Yuma is a really great thing for Yuma. I want to recognize, just a point of privilege, if you might, just a couple of folks in the audience. I have 2 of my elected district governing board members, meaning 2 of my 5 bosses in the audience with us, and that's Ms. Maria Chavoya and Mr. Richard Lamb, who have joined us here. And there's a number of superintendents that we'll be able to interact with at lunch today. So just really great to have everyone here. But it's a really special day because we're able to recognize the work by one of Yuma's finest schools, and that would be Roosevelt School in the Yuma Elementary School District, District 1. There's something going on here in Yuma we call the Yuma Magic, and it really is exemplified by the great work being done at Roosevelt. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Terry Clark from the State Literacy Director in Read On, Arizona, to give a brief overview of the efforts to conduct case studies around the state in partnership with ADE, and then we'll formally recognize Roosevelt School for their outstanding achievements in third grade reading. So, Terry?
Well, thank you, Vice President Kaur, and thank you, President Narducci and other members of the board for allowing me to come today and share. I'm here to share a research project that Read On Arizona, in collaboration with the State Board of Ed and the Department of Education, has been working on, called Third Grade Reading Success: Decoding What Works. The case study project was intended to identify schools that had some of the most improved growth trends between 2015 and 2019, and it was to begin to show what's possible. We need to believe that the acceleration necessary to reach our 2030 progress meter goals for third grade reading are indeed possible, and we need to understand better the proven strategies of how to get there. So we started with data, and we identified schools that had distinctive trends in a few ways. Improvement for all students and low-income students, schools that were having success at decreasing the minimally proficient students out of that lowest category on our state assessment. And we looked at schools by urban, rural, suburban areas, and public and charter, as well as other subgroups. We then went to those schools for a site visit and asked them, no easy feat, we asked them to pull together their administrators, their teachers, paraprofessionals, director of curriculum and instruction, have a family representative, and any other team members they felt it was important for us to hear from, so we could listen and learn from them by asking them what they think is driving their results. So I'm here today on behalf of the department and the board and Read On to share the story of Roosevelt School in Yuma Elementary District. Roosevelt School opened its doors in 1926. Its mission is to challenge and empower students to take ownership of their learning, to work effectively with teachers, parents, and each other, proficiently using technology to become successful lifelong learners. It serves approximately 268 K-5 students. Its student population is 92% Hispanic, and 90% of its students qualify for free and/or reduced lunch. The two trends that stood out in the data in selecting Roosevelt as a case study, one was a 43-point increase in third grade students passing the state assessment between 2015 and 2018. It went from 9% to 52%, which is above the state average. The other trend was a 42-point decrease for economically disadvantaged students scoring minimally proficient. So it took that down from 77% to 35%, which is a huge lift of getting those students out of that bottom category. In their story, captured in this brief case study, there are a few things that stand out. By engaging the entire school community, Roosevelt has been able to create dramatic improvement through strategies such as personalized learning and a clear focus on tackling chronic absenteeism. An example of this is a home liaison who works with all families to identify needed community supports. This home liaison is a key player in tackling chronic absenteeism, which has a large impact on students' attendance and student achievement. One third grade teacher shared that a student had missed 16 school days in the first quarter, but once the home liaison engaged with the student's family, the student no longer missed school days and allowed the student to be present for critical instruction and learning. The Roosevelt School is a terrific example of what's possible with dedicated leadership, vision, and effective instruction in a comprehensive literacy system built at the school level. So at this point, I would like to invite the Roosevelt School representatives to join us for this recognition.
So President Narducci, Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, if the board members can come down And we're going to take a picture and present Roosevelt School with their Apple Award. So President Narducci, members of the board, is one of these awards that will go out this year.
First of 4 to be awarded this year.
All right, thank you, and congratulations once more. That is absolutely awesome. We'll move on to the super. Is that it, Dr. Moore?
Yes, thank you.
We'll move on to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Hoffman?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you for being there.
Thank you. I wish I could be there in person. So good morning, everyone. And I want to first recognize that this meeting, the State Board of Education meeting, is taking place on the traditional lands of the Yavapai Apache, Cocopah, and Quechan, and Maricopa Pima people. And I am sorry that I'm not there. I was actually in Yuma County earlier this month when I had the privilege of traveling to San Luis over to the Southwest Junior High, where we were surprising Principal Omar Duran with the prestigious Milken Award. This award is given to only 40 educators across the country every year. Principal Duran had no idea why we were visiting. It was a huge surprise for him, and it was such a wonderful celebration. He started his career as an instructional aide before becoming a classroom teacher, instructional coach, and now a principal. And his story is proof of what happens when we empower and elevate all of the fantastic professionals who work in our schools. So congratulations again to Principal Duran. Also, while I was in Yuma, I had a chance to meet with County Superintendent Tom Tyree, who joins our meeting today. I'm grateful for the partnership and leadership of all of our county superintendents. And then last week, I also had a chance to visit schools in Cochise County. I went to Naco, which is a school community right on the U.S.-Mexico border where students share multiple languages and cultures. I also visited schools in Bisbee, met with district superintendents from throughout Cochise County, and also attended the Innovations in Education Conference. And my last announcement is that I want to share that I will be delivering my State of Education speech to the House Education Committee on February 3rd. We will be sharing the speech via our live stream on Facebook if you're interested in tuning in online. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Very much appreciate all you're doing. We will move on to the Executive Director's report. Director Williams.
President Narducci, members of the board, the Executive Director's report today is brief. Board staff has been working diligently to update the educator discipline data that we originally gave to you at the board's retreat. So for my report today, Jessica Mueller, who is the data and research analyst for the Board of Education, will be presenting her findings.
Thank you, Jessica.
Okay, there we go. So the last time you did receive this one-pager of the discipline report was in July, was when the report was finished. In August at the retreat, we reviewed it in addition to the larger report. That one will go through a larger revamp this cycle. So you're going to see more expanded data in some of those areas that you had requested in the past, which was years of experience, and we're looking at getting more information on those reciprocity teachers. So the main updates that you're going to see here is that our cases of adjudication is almost at 300% from 2012 to 2019. That's a 50% bump since the 2018. So we're seeing a steady increase in the number of adjudicated cases from year to year. The increase that was expected was 14.5%. We finished out at 18.9% from 2018 to 2019. The main other changes that you're going to see is that the substitute and secondary certificates have reversed a little bit. What we're finding is that now we're seeing more discipline against secondary certificate holders rather than the substitute in the past. Another major difference that we're seeing in reported data is that with ADE and SBE going in on a shared case management database system, we're able to get cleaner, more reliable data that goes back to those cases from 2012. So that's what the report will include, is more updated information in those ways. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good job. Anything else, Director Williams?
That concludes the executive director report.
Appreciate that very much.
You're welcome.
Should I make a excuse for Catcher not being here, since he's usually at our meetings, or would you like to?
Yes. President Narducci, members of the board, Catcher Baden, the board's deputy director, is not present today because he is following bills at the legislature and has multiple meetings today, including the House Education meeting at 2.
Thank you.
He misses all of you dearly.
And we miss him too. He's good to have around. Thanks for those reports, everybody, and we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is our call to the public. This is a time for the public to comment on items on the consent agenda and other topics that are not on today's agenda. I don't know how many we have, but I think we're going to go. I believe we have one. We're going to go for the full 3 minutes. Director Williams.
The request to speak is from Fatima Covarrubia and Margit Soto Chavera, and they'll be sharing the 3 minutes.
Good morning, members of the board and everyone present. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I am Fatima Covarrubias. I am a student here at Arizona Western College. My major is engineering. I have the honor of being the 2019-2020 Student Government Association President. I am an honors and camp student, and I'm also a resident assistant here on campus.
My name is Margot Soto. I'm currently a student in FWC with informatics major, but also part of Student Government Association as Vice President of Records, and I'm working as a mentor for the College Assistant Migrant Program of AWC. We are both proud to say that we are graduate students from PepTech High School.
We would like to take this moment to share our experiences as students from an alternative high school, such as PepTech.
Whole programs such as the Migrant Program help the students to give the support that for achieve their success.
Education is not a one-size-fits-all. Which is why alternative schools are so important to ensure that every student gets what they need to succeed. Personally, when I was ready to enter high school, a personal situation that arose in my home made it difficult for me and my sister to continue our education. She had to drop out of the public school that we had close to where we lived at, which really made us panic because we didn't know what was going to happen with our education. However, PepTech High School gave us that opportunity to continue our high school without falling behind. We became part of the McKinney-Vento program, and the Migrant Program gave us everything that we needed to perform our best. In no time, we were as confident as we had never been before. And the structural base really helped us and many other students to get our high school diploma and to prepare us for higher education, the workforce, or whichever path we decided to take.
In my case, when I started to study here in the United States, PepTech High School allowed me to study there. Other high schools didn't believe I was sufficient because of my lack of English at the moment, but PepTech saw in me how excited I was to study, to learn, and that I wanted to be one of their best students. And also for they encouraged me so much with their help, the guidance, support that they give me. The staff and faculty of PEPTEC always had the time to each individual on the classroom to help them, to guide them, and to explain and show us how humans were as students. PEPTEC was a small school, but it was one of my biggest experiences of my life. Thanks to this school, I started to realize that the schools can be a place comfortable when we are preparing for our future. They gave a second chance to all the students that were able and willing to continue their studies.
Alternative schools are dedicated to make sure that every student can achieve their goals. They work hard to provide an inclusive, supportive, and nourishing environment where they try to break those stereotypes that these type of schools might get.
We thank you for your support, the trust, and giving to alternative schools and programs such as the Migrant Program, because you are supporting each of us and supporting our futures. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well done. I know Dr. Kaur wants to say the same thing.
We're so very proud of you. Nicely done. We're glad you're here and leading our student government in really wonderful ways. So thank you for those comments.
That concludes the call to the public.
Then we'll move on to our consent agenda. And our consent agenda, I believe we just need to have Member Wellborn pulling item 4AC as declaring a conflict, which I read. I kind of knew that right off the bat. And will be recusing herself from the vote. Do I have a motion to approve items 4A, 4B, 4D through 4F?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now we'll move on to item 4C. Member Wellborn is recusing herself from the vote. Do I have a motion to approve item 4C? We have a motion by Member Burton. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Member Baker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There we go.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move on to item 5. This is a time for the public to comment on items that are on the general session. Do we have any comments?
President Narducci, members of the board, no requests to speak have been submitted.
Thank you. So we don't have to limit anybody to 3 minutes. And by the way, if you guys wanted to go longer than 3 minutes, that was going to be fine. So it's all good. We'll move on to item number 6, general session. Director Williams.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, item 6A is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the 2019-2020 and the 2020-2021 A through F accountability system for traditional schools and alternative schools. If you recall, at the December 13th, 2019 board meeting, the board received materials and directed board staff to send out a survey on the different changes to the accountability system. Wendy is here from the Department of Education if there are any in-depth questions pertaining to the recommendations that you have on your executive summary sheet. As a presentation today, I will go through each of the staff's recommendations, and if the board wishes to have a discussion at that time on that specific recommendation, I think that would be appropriate. So starting with the 9-12 alternative schools. At the December 13th board meeting, the board received a presentation on moving the alternative accountability CCRI benchmark from 1 to 1.5. The reason for this move is that a majority of the alternative schools were receiving points and were able to access the full 1 point. So you were looking at the data and it was skewing to the left. So the alternative ATAC recommends moving that to 1.5. As a comparison, the traditional school 9-12 model is sitting at 2. So it was a little bit lower than the traditional, but still challenging for those schools. The second bullet point is to lower the total points needed to receive a letter grade to 50 total points. Last year it was at 60 as the denominator, so by lowering it to 50 as the denominator, you capture more schools within the accountability system. The third the third bullet point is adding community college and trade school enrollment to the post-secondary bucket of the CCRI rubric, while lowering the points awarded in that bucket from 1 to 0.5. The reason for the lowering of 1 to 0.5 is because schools now have additional options for their students within that bucket, so they have more opportunities to earn those full points. Do any of the board members have any questions in regard to the 912 accountability recommendation?
Member Baker?
Just a point of clarification to start with. We're moving into a significant shift, right, as we move from end of course to 10th grade assessments, correct, this year?
Member Baker, that is correct. We're moving away from end of course assessments and we're moving towards a summative 10th grade assessment.
So there's going to be a significant shift in scoring for this group, regardless of what we do. I'm going to start by saying I strongly support the adding a community college and trade school enrollment. I'm concerned about the college and career readiness indicator benchmark. The reality is that alternative schools are a real big challenge in terms of assigning grades because they are so very different in their makeup, the kind of students that they deal with, and most of them are very small. So to come up with a system that is truly objective and can be applied to every single school it's a huge challenge. And that challenge increases as we shift the testing pattern. I don't know about alternative schools all across the state. I do know that our alternative school in Vail, which is a really good school, it's the only alternative school that's ever earned an A+ designation, and they've done it twice. They are C rated right now, and they have a plan in place to improve that, and a major part of that plan is to get more college and career readiness indicator points. We're now well past the middle of the year. This is going to significantly impact their plan. And if this plan goes into effect, if you do not get as many points in college and career readiness, then you have to find some other place to get those points. Well, the most logical place to get more points is with proficiency. But they don't have 10th graders because they focus on juniors and seniors. So since the testing occurs the sophomore year, they're locked out from getting proficiency points. And I don't know if there's an easy way to fix that, but I'm concerned about decreasing the value or making it more difficult to get college and career readiness indicator points. Because if we can't have a system that's wonderfully fair and applicable to all the schools in the alternative setting, the very least we can do is have a system that incentivizes really good behaviors. And the things on the college and career readiness indicator list, if alternative schools are successfully doing that, they're doing something really good for kids. And that we can put a stake in the ground and think, this is really good. The points are really tough because of the way of the testing, but we know if they're getting those college and career readiness indicator points, they're doing some really good things. And I understand it's not discriminating very well. But maybe college and career readiness indicator points are not so much about discrimination between schools as it is a guarantee that those schools are doing what they should be doing in terms of helping kids prepare for life after high school.
Thank you, Member Baker. All great points. I'm just wondering that a lot of were Member Baker's points taken into consideration in the process that occurred in order to bring this back? Because I know that we've been looking at this for a while. We put it off in order to get it to a place where we could actually do something with it. The points that Member Baker raises with respect to his Vail School District, et cetera, how were they addressed and discussed potentially in the process, if at all?
Good morning. President Narducci, Member Baker, thank you for allowing us to address what the AA TAC had looked at. So our main goal after the first year was to actually go through the components and really analyze them, see what impact they were having, and did we need to readdress it. When we did look at the CCRI, that is 30% or 30 points of the whole model, and it wasn't as bad as it wasn't just differentiating, it was also really highly skewed to the left. So with the data that we had, we were able to look, would we have a huge negative impact by dropping it to moving it up, to 1.5, or keeping it 1, and it would increase a little bit better differentiation, but it would not be a horrible impact. Using the terms, as you guys know I do, are very simple. But it was just so skewed to the left, where almost everybody was receiving those points from the first year, that we were afraid there wouldn't be any room for growth or improvement. And as we know, we want to build components that encourage better performance. And if from the day one, from the first component, but again, we can leave it, that is the decision of the board. But the other point was also we looked at the component for the College of Career Readiness in the trade school. But all those conversations did occur, and that was where we came down on it, is we would like to have the encouragement and some ability to move and improve after the first year.
Member Baker?
President Newsom, members of the board, I'd suggest with the shift, the change that's already occurring because of testing, we hold off on this for 1 year just to see what it looks like after we make this huge shift in who gets tested and how they get tested.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. Member Welborn.
Thank you, President Narducci and members of the board. I just have a little question about the third item here, which is adding community college and trade school enrollment. Do you have any information that tells you where we are in the state in terms of the number of kids that are going from alternative schools to community college? What is the success rate of them staying in community college enrollment or trade school enrollment? Is there good perseverance, or are there issues where students have a hard time staying in? Do you have any information you can share about that?
President Narducci, members of the board, members Welborn, we do have the capability to do that analysis. I do not have it for you today. Through the National Clearinghouse data, we are able to track kids by school through the system for about 6 years. To see if they at least get their first 2 or 4 year degree. So the capability does exist, but I do not have it available for you today.
I would suggest that on this item that really the topic is not so much enrollment, but it's completion. And it's in that kind of gray area between who's responsible, the high school or the community college or the trade school. That I can understand would be a significant debate, but I would also argue that that is a gap right now for all of us, and so is worthy of having a discussion around how can we better encourage both the community colleges, trade school, and the high schools to close that gap so we have more perseverance for the students.
We happen to have a community college genius on our board, so Dr. Corr for a little bit.
I hope my board members made note of the term genius as applied to your community college president. Member Wellborn, good questions all, because community colleges in general are moving away from just this concept of access to one of success. And our data here at Arizona Western College indicates that the factors that lead to degree completion success, whether they come from alternative schools or directly from our feeder high schools, have the variables are full-time attendance, arriving to us without the need for remediation, but full-time attendance being a real key factor, being part of cohorted programs. So the variables aren't so much of where they come from, high school, alternative high school, or traditional feeder high school. It's the manner in which they enroll and our efforts to retain them. So that's the short answer. I have the data here locally. I'm certain it exists at the state. I wouldn't imagine it would be much different at the state than it is here at AWC.
So based on that, would it make sense to modify this to full-time enrollment in a community college, since you indicate that that's a positive indicator rather than part-time? Or should we just study it some more?
Well, I have a thought. I'm not sure it's as well thought out, just because you just posed the question. I wonder what, from a community college perspective, we want full-time students because we know they succeed at significantly higher levels. And after this meeting, we'll chat about the Yuma Promise, which just does that. It incentivizes full-time enrollment. I'm wondering about the ability of our alternative high schools to influence that full-time enrollment.
Right.
And I'd hate to measure them by a factor of which they don't have full control over. So it's equivocating a little bit, but two different perspectives of the same issue.
Okay, so let me just ask a question. So if in fact, thank you for the comments. So a couple years ago, I think it was, we decided that we were going to put this on the shelf, not the shelf, but put it to the side and develop it. We took it out of the normal process that we were going in. What would be, in the event that we're not going to proceed today with this, what is the negative ramification and what would be the process?
Sure. So President Arducci, members of the board, from the conversation, I'm seeing some hesitancy towards moving the CCRI benchmark from 1 to 1.5. However, I am not hearing so much hesitancy for lowering the denominator to 50, nor am I hearing hesitancy of the community college and trade school enrollment, although I noted Member Wellborn and Dr. Kaur's conversation to potentially look into for future iterations. So if the board feels comfortable moving a motion for the bullet points 2 and 3 and waiting on raising the benchmark to 1.5, whether that's in a year or in 2 years, those are your options. Or you can table everything to February. But the positive and negatives is that by making a decision today, it would be the first time that the board has actually made an accountability decision with half a school year left for these schools. So worst case scenario, we wait until February. I'm sorry.
Member Baker?
Oh, yeah. And
President Nucci,
I'm sorry.
Board, I'd like to move to approve changes to the 912 alternative accountability system for school years 1920 and 2021 to include lowering the total points needed to receive a letter grade to 50 points, adding full-time enrollment at community college and trade school to the post-secondary bucket of the CCRI rubric while lowering the points awarded in the bucket from 1 to 0.5.
just clarification on Member Baker's motion. At this point, the Department of Education cannot model full-time enrollment for community college. So we would have to do the motion as
Remove that.
remove full-time and leave it as stated.
So is the motion as stated then? For that, just enrollment versus full-time? Okay. So with that motion, Member Ruiz.
Yeah, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members. So let me see if I understand. So then the motion would be that we are going to reduce the points award, the bucket from 1 to 0.5?
President Arducci, Member Ruiz, that is correct. So the motion that currently is on the table that hasn't yet to be seconded from Member Baker is that to approve changes to the 912 alternative accountability system for school years 1920 and 2021 to include lowering the total points needed to receive a letter grade to 50 total points and adding community college and trade school enrollment to the post-secondary bucket of the CCRI rubric while lowering the points awarded in the bucket from 1 to 0.5. The reasoning for lowering from 1 to 0.5 is because now there's more opportunity for those schools to gain points in that bucket.
So then, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members, so this is what I'm trying to get at. In the overall, what happens is schools struggle, and I know with the communities that we deal with, we struggle to get kids to college. Now, the way the point system works is by 10th grade then, kids are going to take the exam. So everybody's going to go, whew, okay, exam's over. They're not going to have to test at grade 11 or 12. So then what's the incentive at 11th and 12th grade to get kids to college? And, if overall, when we reduce points to CCRI, that's the impact, is that there's no incentive. In fact, it becomes a disincentive. So you just kind of relax and go, whew, we made it. And you don't want kids to relax at 11th grade or 12th grade. You want the school. You don't want the personnel. You want everybody to go like, okay, the next goal is we got to get kids in college. And not everybody's going to go to four-year university. That's just the reality of it. In our neighborhoods, boy, if we get them to community college, we know from there they will get to university after that. And that's what I want to make sure is that we don't in any way at all, my personal view is we don't mess with CCRI. That is just as important as that 10th grade proficiency.
So President Narducci, Member Ruiz, that's exactly what this lowering is doing, which is getting the students to go to the post-secondary education.
Right, so I'm now given like the next defense,
the
next
next
wall in
level.
case there's trying to water down CCRI in the future. It's like, firing the salvo, saying, hey, let's take a look at it. Thank you.
I do need a second to continue that. Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Mack.
I'll second.
I'm sorry.
And then I'll.
Okay. So we have a second.
Okay.
So we have a motion. We have a second.
And then I guess in general, I just wanted to comment my concern about changing more than one thing at a time in any, and so we may think that we're solving one problem by making this change, but then by lowering it to 50 points, we don't know what that change is going to be, and then we're adding, at the same time that we're adding enrollment in community and trade school, we're decreasing the points in that bucket. It's going to be very hard to tell after this year what the results are and why we got the results they did if we're changing all these things at the same time. So I'm just concerned about that. I understand the rationale, I appreciate it, and all the work put into the reasoning. So in principle, I'm not against any of them, but I just worry that we're going to find ourselves in a position where, especially with things changing with testing. So I would just urge us to consider that.
So,
but I'm not,
I'm with
yeah,
you. So with respect to that, how will this be followed in order to, let's say we go through with this motion, it's approved today. Let's assume, how is this followed from this point forward in order to support study and the analysis that we need in order to make sure that what we've done is the correct, it's driving the right behavior.
So President Arducci, members of the board, with all of today's votes, what it will potentially and hopefully do is establish an accountability system for the next 2 years, which will allow board staff and department staff to study and research the impacts of all accountability systems. And then if any changes need to be made to the accountability system, those changes will align to a new estate assessment system with the board's 5-year plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, President Narducci. Just quick question. So, obviously wildly supportive of adding the community college piece, but dropping the points from 1 to 0.5, what negative impact, if any, would there be from keeping it at the full 1?
Members, there would be no penalty. It just that we didn't have it on the CCRI before. Community colleges and trade schools were not. We know that is the niche for the alternative kids. They tend to go to those more frequently. So in an era of just looking more broadly and the more points available, and remember we looked at the component overall, which is currently already slightly skewed. We know with the more points coming in without making some kind of adjustment, it would just go more to the left as well.
Understood and appreciated. I guess I would ask, I understand we have a motion and a second that we'll vote on, but I would offer the thought that we can do all this and keep the points associated with that particular bucket at the full 1 as a alternative to the motion on the table.
With respect to what?
Yes, sir.
I'm just opening up for the members and then I'll ask questions. With respect to what Member Kaur just mentioned, is there any other thought on that? Negative or positive? We have a motion and we have a second. I'll call for a vote on the motion and the second, and then should it not pass, we'll have discussion. And if anybody wants to explain no votes, that's good too. Are there any other questions for AD? Yes, sir.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members, so I can understand. Maybe I'm a little bit slower than the rest. I was kind of worried when we have a recommendation, then we'll have an amendment, then alternative amendment, because then you go like, so what's the impact going to be? Sometimes you just let things, you make a change, let people see what's going to happen, and then you adjust. So we've got two kind of different ideas here. What protects CCRI and where we don't dilute right now the impact that it has. Out of the two different proposals, which is going to protect it most? So we don't dilute CCRI going forward. I don't know if I'm making sense. Am I making sense here?
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members, in regards to the first one, you're not diluting by adding community colleges and trade schools. You're actually opening up the base for more opportunity to earn those points. As far as how the points were looked at, that was our goal and our promise that we would go, or the technical team would look at it with good eyes, and it's based on the recommendation. They felt, after looking at it and looking at all the data and the spread of the data, that's why they came forth with the two recommendations, to have the 1 go to the 0.5 because of much more opportunity to gain those points. And then also after the first year, having things so over to the left side, have a more opportunity to improve. Those are their recommendations. Those were the basis of the recommendations. The other consideration too that we did take in consideration that I didn't address earlier is the proficiency. So we did also, as a technical advisory, look at these kids, and that is why it's only weighted at 15%, because we do see that a lot of times they don't have the end count. It's going to have a little bit more of an impact, but we didn't see it having completely wipe away all of it. But that's already in place. That impact already existed. I hope that helps clarify.
Member Welborn.
President Narducci, members of the board, I would suggest that we remove this last piece on changing the points from 1 to a half and consider it at the same time that we revisit changing the points from 1 to 1.5 and see some modeling, just so we can see all how that impacts the schools. And secondly, I want to remind ourselves that we always said that every school can get an A. And just because the data skews to the left doesn't necessarily mean the right thing is to force a redistribution so that we have an even curve of A, B, C's, and D's. So I just want us to be aware. I mean, the work of the alternative schools is very difficult. And I want us to be wary of anything that that is a disincentive. I share the concern. So let's just keep those thoughts in mind and study it a little bit more.
So, President Narducci, members of the board, just to clarify, we have a motion that has been motion by Member Baker. It's been seconded by Dr. Mack. Can I call you doctor now?
I did.
Dr. Mack. And it's the 2 bullet points in the executive summary sheet. Now, there has been some board members who have expressed to take out the lowering of the points awarded in the post-secondary bucket and to keep those points at 1. Does the maker of the motion wish to amend his motion?
Oh, sure.
Member Baker says yes.
I like it when he sits next to me. I like it. I can whisper to him.
Does the individual who made the second agree to that motion amendment? Yes. Okay. So members of the board, the motion that's before you is to approve the changes to the 9-12 alternative accountability system for school years 1920 and 2021 to include lowering the total points needed to receive a letter grade to 50 total points, and adding community college and trade school enrollment to the post-secondary bucket of the CCRI rubric and keeping the points awarded in that bucket at 1.
Correct. Thank you. And with that motion and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So taking it from there, that means that we will look at the other 2 as we go along and then maybe address it in February. And I'll say maybe. Member Baker.
Yeah, President Narducci, members of the board. I just want to state I want to be respectful of the work that staff and the ATAC have done. And just speaking for myself personally, I'm open to continuing to look at both of these as we see the impact of the new testing model and as we move forward. So I thank you for the work. Thank you to the ATAC for their work, and we'll continue to look at this.
Thank you. Move on to the K-8 traditional model.
President Narducci, members of the board, the K-8 traditional model, we are asking you to make a change to the acceleration readiness indicator. That is because the end of course assessments have been removed for the 8th grade advanced math. So there were 2 options presented to you. Option A, which was awarding 5 points to schools who increased the percent of highly proficient, and option B, awarding 2.5 points to schools who increase the percent of highly proficient 8th grade math students from the prior year to the current year, and 2.5 points to schools who decrease the percent of minimally proficient 8th grade math students from the prior year to the current. some arguments for staff recommendations. The staff recommendation is option B, which is 2.5 points for highly proficient and decreasing minimally proficient for an additional 2.5 points. The recommendation is for both the 1920 and 2021 school year. If the board wishes to go in this direction, one of the arguments is that you are including the growth of the lowest performing students, and it would allow for schools to get some points for doing some good work with bringing some students up. So survey results also looked at option B as a potential option. So if the board members have any questions, I'm available for those.
Thank you, Director Williams. Any questions from members of the board?
President Narducci.
Member Welborn.
I just want to confirm on this one that the current language says in the rubric that the proficiency rate of 25%, and that we're saying that's going away.
Correct. So President Narducci, Member Welborn, there has been some discussion of also setting a threshold for that highly proficient student level. I've already had those conversations with other members of the board, and so that's something that we'll just work with the department, and we'll have the board set a threshold within the business rules, most likely at the February board meeting. The 25% that you refer to is in reference to the 8th grade students who took that Algebra 1 assessment. So what we need to do is we need to look at the 8th grade assessment to determine what to determine what an appropriate threshold would be.
Thank you.
Member Baker.
President Narducci, members of the board, I don't have major heartburn on option A or option B, but I do feel very strongly that if it's option A, there needs to be a threshold for what is, or at what point is highly proficient enough, what is good enough look like in terms of highly proficient, and if it's going to be option B, that it have both that and also what is good enough look like for the minimum number of proficiency. Because if you carry this to its logical end, what we're trying to say is every school should continue to strive to increase the number of highly proficient. And if a school should achieve what we hope that they would, and 100% of the students are highly proficient, they're toast for points because they can't improve and they can't decrease the number. So there needs to be that threshold.
And once we get all our schools to 100% highly proficient, we won't have anything to worry about, will we?
Dissolve the State Board of Education.
Exactly. Any other comments or discussion from members of the board? Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve option B, which has been recommended to us, for the Acceleration Readiness Indicator for the K-8 Accountability System for the 2019, 2020, and 2020 and 2021 school years? Option B is to award 2.5 points to schools who increase the percent of highly proficient, performance level 4, 8th grade math students from the prior year to the current year, and 2.5 points to schools who decrease the percent of minimally proficient, performance level 1, 8th grade math students from the prior year to the current year.
So moved.
We have a motion by Member Mack.
Second.
We have a second by Member Welborn. All those in favor? Okay, we have discussion. Comment?
President Narducci, let me ask staff, how long would it take you to come up, what is necessary for you to come up with thresholds for minimally proficient and highly proficient?
President Narducci, Member Baker, Wendy already has them finished. Wendy already has the thresholds finished, Member Baker. She has them right now. She can give you the thresholds right now, but they weren't included in the board's materials, so I don't think the board should vote on. I would recommend the board not voting on thresholds until it's.
Then can I suggest I can either make a motion to amend the motion or ask whoever made the motion to add that we look at thresholds at the next meeting.
We'll just, can we amend the motion?
So amended.
Okay. And seconded?
I just want a point of clarification from Member Baker. So when you talk about a threshold, are you talking about a threshold for the growth in terms of increasing the number of proficient or decreasing? Or are you talking about setting a proficiency threshold?
The second.
The second.
Proficiency.
So could you give me an example of what that might be? So in the minimally proficient or highly proficient category.
President Narducci, members of the board, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that currently statewide about 10% of 8th grade students are classified as highly proficient. It's in that neighborhood. And so there are schools across the state who've been really pushing on that. And so they're at 30%, 40% highly proficient. But there comes a point when it becomes almost impossible to increase that. I mean, if you're already that far above the state average, so the question is, what does good enough look like? If a school is, I don't know, just pick a random number, if they have 40% of their kids highly proficient, maybe that's good enough. And they should get the points rather than being penalized because they can't make that better every single year. Or, as I stated, if you state the extreme, and it's for a small specialty school that within a school district that is restricting enrollment, it is possible that there's a school somewhere in the state that they're at 100%, and then they can't earn any points.
How does it work on the minimally proficient end of the scale?
I'll let the experts answer that question.
The experts being Wendy?
Yes.
Thanks, Wendy.
We should have you sit in the front row, Wendy.
I tried. President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, I'm going to give you some high-level numbers just so before we come to you in February, you have an idea of what we were looking at. For example, just looking at 8th grade students enrolled in that 8th grade assessment, so not taking into consideration the Algebra 1 in that total number. Proficiency level 1, currently the state percent of kids at minimally proficient, like Member Baker was saying, is at 41. Let's look at the opposite end at proficiency level 4, which is your highly proficient. There's 18%. So what ATAC did a just quick look, and I brought some of those numbers. Now these are not off the FAE and non-FAE. We shared with you before, we really don't see a statistical difference at the state level with FAE and non-FAE kids. So what I'm presenting to you right now is basically the public information. When we looked at what if we said, because if you're, let's say you're one of those cottage schools that you really do have really highly performing kids, we don't want to discourage you for trying to reach as well. So we looked at setting the bar at like 90, and if we set it at 90, we would have approximately only 5 schools that would automatically get those points. And then at the other end, if we go to 80, then there's 27 schools that would automatically get those points. So as you were saying, even though the only state is 18 getting highly proficient, we do have apparently, 27 schools that could then automatically get it, but then there's still room for schools to move forward. So it'll be the will of the board, and we can bring back different modeling. Then we went to the 80-20 rule, and that gives you a few more schools that would automatically get it. But we can actually give it a little bit deeper dive. We were just a little short on time.
So just for a point of discussion, when you do it off averages, we have extreme performance. So let's look at some of the lower performing students or schools. You might have 60% minimally proficient. And if you set a threshold for them that's so far away from where their reality is, if you set it at 20% because you said 18%, or as you say 18% is the...
Member Walborn, it's the highest percentage.
Oh, what was the lowest one?
41.
41. So let's say we have a school that's 60% minimally proficient, and making and getting them to get from 60 down to 40 is a huge reach. And I'm thinking that maybe a combination of the two, of thresholds and or growth, might be a good way to incent and reward for significant increases. So you might suggest they could make a 10% increase in highly proficient, or a 10% decrease in minimally proficient, or hitting one of these thresholds. Because I want to provide incentives for schools that are really far from the state average. And
Member
so they're
Walbert.
motivated.
For a point of clarification, as the business rules read right now, that would be just to automatically get you those points. Any improvement right now for a school to either increase their highly proficient or lower their minimally proficient would gain them points. So I think I may have misspoken and led you a little bit off. Those were points that you would automatically qualify. If you're sitting at 95% highly proficient, you would get your 2.5. However, if you're at 88 and you go to 89, you would end up earning those 2.5. So I hope that point of clarification helps a little bit.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. You're talking that the rule is a little different based on whether you're in the minimally proficient or the highly proficient. And I'm sorry.
President Ducci and Member Wells, let me try. The idea is not to change the current rules. I mean, if you improve, you get points. But to set a threshold so that if you get to a certain point, even if you don't improve, you still get the points. Because
So there is a combination already.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry if I didn't speak that clearly.
So President Narducci, Member Wellborn. Member Wellborn, as the second to Dr. Mack's motion, do you approve adding and bringing thresholds to the next State Board of Education meeting to be added to the motion?
I'm understanding that there was consensus that we wanted to consider that before we voted on this item. Is that correct? No.
No.
So,
No, the motion was, could we have the whole motion,
yeah,
please?
let's approve the option.
The motion that Member Mack made and Member Wellborn originally seconded was to approve option B for the acceleration readiness indicator for the K-8 accountability system for the 2019-2020 and 2020-21 school years, and bring thresholds to the next State Board of Education meeting.
Which was amended by Member Baker.
It was
Okay.
it was
Yes,
amended.
I continue to second that.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Thank you for the discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Yes, Member Baker.
Let me just add a point of some important, what I think is important information. This is another situation where testing is going to affect results next year, because there are a lot of schools where 7th and 8th grade students who were taking high school level math classes did not take the 8th grade math test, because they were taking the end of course test for those high school classes. This year, all of those students in middle school taking high school classes, they no longer have the option of doing end of course testing. They all have to take that 8th grade test. So hopefully, this year we will see a significant increase in highly proficient on 8th grade tests, because we're going to include all the middle school kids taking high school classes. So there's, so the staff and the ATEC are going to have a whole new set of data to analyze after this year, and everything's going to be shifted, regardless of what we do at this meeting or the next meeting.
Thank you, Member Baker. All right, if I'm following the agenda, we're still on 912 traditional model.
President Narducci, members of the board, the 912 traditional model, if you recall last year, because of many of assessments, the board voted to utilize a subgroup improvement indicator for the growth metric. However, the board did ask for the ATAC and for staff to bring in to figure out if a true growth measure could be utilized for the high school growth indicator. The option B, which is to move to a student growth percentile model of growth utilizing 8th grade assessment and comparing to the new 10th grade assessment, is possible and is the staff's recommendation. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Members of the board, questions and discussion? Member Mack.
Thank you, President.
You call me doctor. JD's qualifies doctor. Sure does.
I would just encourage the board to still keep subgroup growth and improvement at the heart of everything we're thinking about and considering for the future. Just knowing that there are schools out there possibly that are earning those A's and B's and yet masking some of the work that they're doing or not doing with some of the subgroups. And so really keeping in mind, it's aligned to federal policy, it's aligned to what we want to do to move our ELs, learners, for example, forward. So keeping that in mind for future.
And President Narducci, Dr. Mack, to your point, just for the board's knowledge, the Department of Education does plan on continuing to run the subgroup improvement numbers for the schools and provide that data to the schools in the static file. In the static file, which is close enough to those schools so that the schools can monitor their subgroup performances. The board could potentially decide, once we have longitudinal data on student improvement, to add back student improvement to the 9-12 model for the 21-22 school year. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Member Mack. Any other discussion or comments? Member Welborn.
Yes, President Narducci, members of the board. I continue to be concerned about using SGP as a measure for growth because, again, it's a relative concept and it's forcing a curve that may or may not exist. It's based on peers' performance rather than absolute performance. And given that my impression is that the proficiency rates for math and ELA in high school are low. I don't know that rewarding schools for growth in this manner provides enough of incentive to improve to reach proficiency. So my question would be, after 3 years or plus years of a statewide assessment using SGP, do we have any data that demonstrates we're improving proficiency rates? Because it's not really whether a student improves and grows better than the next person that's as important in my mind. It's more important, are we getting kids to proficiency? And at least when we had SGT, there's a combination there because we're trying to set a benchmark where we're trying to get kids to proficiency. And if we change it just to the average, well, average proficiency in high school is not very high. And I think we need to consider how can we provide more incentive to get improved proficiency rates.
Thank you, Member Welborn. Is there any further discussion regarding those comments? Member Baker?
President Narducci, Member Welborn, other members. This is another area where we're in somewhat uncharted territory because the whole testing scenario is changing. And it's complicated and it's kind of messy. I'm willing to support the staff recommendation, the ATAC recommendation on this, and then continue to study it.
Thank you, Member Baker. With that, do I have a motion to approve option B for the growth indicator for the 9 through 12 accountability system for the 2019-2020 and 2020-2021 school years? Option B is to move to a student growth percentile, SGP, model of growth utilizing the 8th grade assessment and comparing to the new 10th grade assessment. Do I have a motion in that regard?
So moved.
Motion by Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Mack. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed?
Nay.
We have a no vote. Would you like to explain your no vote?
Again, I just am concerned about continuing to use SGP. I would like to see some data that demonstrates we're improving our proficiency rates using SGP.
Thank you, Member Welborn. Now we'll move on to the special education bonus point.
President Narducci, members of the board, the special education bonus point allows for special education points when a school has 80% of the state special education average. This ask was from a board member to change the threshold to lower it to 60% of the state's special education average in order to receive the special education bonus points. Modeling was done to determine if lowering the special education bonus point threshold allows for more rural schools to be able to receive bonus points. Not only is it just for rural schools, but really for those schools who have almost like a predetermined set population. Modeling on the urbanicity shows that a small percentage of rural schools benefit from lowering the threshold down to 60% of the state special education average, while urban schools see the largest impact if the threshold is lowered to 60%. The staff recommendation on this is actually to take no action and to leave it at 80%. The reason I provided this recommendation to the State Board of Education is because lowering to 60%, the reason for lowering it, we're not seeing it within the model with the urbanicity. We're not seeing a better impact in rural schools. In addition, with the tiered model, you move from a 2 to 1.5 to a 1 point bonus point model, which convolutes the system a little bit. And one of the things we've been hearing a lot is to keep the system as consistent as possible, especially going into the next 2 years. Through some conversations I've had, I do think it would be interesting to study the special education rates of each county. And I think that would get to the issue that we're trying to solve with the special education bonus points and where to set those thresholds. So instead of putting that threshold at the state level, look at placing that threshold at the county level. And I think that would help a lot of those schools. However, with that being said, staff, as in state board staff and department staff, we're not ready to provide a recommendation on county averages currently. But I do think that if we were able to study that and bring it for the 21-22 school year, I think we'd be able to do that. So as it stands right now, the current staff recommendation is to just keep it at 80% and no action would be taken on this business rule.
Thank you, Director Williams. And if in fact things were to go at the county level, what would be the basis for doing it at the county level, and what are the suspicion as to what the results? Why would we have more solid data to go with at the county level to make to move forward in that regard? Just from a guesstimate.
President Narducci, members of the board, other board members may be smarter in this arena than I am, but I would assume that some counties are going to have higher special education rates than other counties. And so if you're truly trying to determine the impact of a school on special education students, then taking the county number and the county average would be more appropriate, and seeing that those students are within their county, within their general population. A small school in Graham County may not have as many special ed students as a school in Maricopa County. You're limited in the number of people that are living there. So I just think it's interesting to study, and if any board members have anything I'm forgetting, please feel free to help me out.
Members of the board, Questions and comments? Member Baker.
President Narducci, members of the board, allow me to go back in history a little bit and explain the intent of these bonus points. Because this was way back when the committee was working to make recommendations to the state board. And the reason for the bonus points is the reality that special education is incredibly expensive and difficult burden for a school district. And schools with who have an average or above average number of special education students, in order to fund the education of those students, they have to take money from regular classrooms. It's just the reality. Well, under Arizona's choice system, it is possible for schools to avoid taking on their full share of special education students. And if they can decrease the number of special education students that they're dealing with, that in turn, not only do they have the benefit of, I mean, let's be honest, special education students tend to drive scores lower. Not only do they have the benefit of not having that group of students in their test pool, but they also have more money to spend in their regular classroom because they're not doing it. So the intent of the bonus points was to recognize that reality and give bonus points to schools who are accepting the responsibility of educating the special education students that they should. And again, just for the sake of transparency, I brought up this change because of Morenci School District. Morenci is very isolated. There's no charter schools. There's no other charter options. So they are educating every single special ed student in Morenci, right? Because you can't go anywhere else. And they missed the bonus points narrowly. That cost them 2 points. That cost them a letter grade. And that was never the intent of this, was to punish a school like Morenci who's doing what they're supposed to do. So I suggested changing the cutoff, and also suggested some kind of a tiered system so that the drop-off wouldn't be as significant. And you wouldn't, I mean, it's almost like a tax rate where you go over a bump and all of a sudden you go from the 20% bracket to the 40% bracket, just like that. So is there a way to graduate that a little bit? I think, I don't know if there was a misunderstanding or how it occurred, but the tiered system that the staff and ATEC looked at was to actually shifted the baseline for a full 2 points at 80% to 1.5 points at 90 to 80. So in other words, if you weren't educating, I mean, even if you had 80%, you would drop from 2 points to 1.5 points, and that was never the intent of what I was suggesting. So the data that we have on the tiered system is skewed, in my opinion. It's not. I was thinking, all right, so you have 80, you move to 60. A tiered system is so maybe you have the full 2 points at 80. You have 1.5. Let me back that up. Yeah, 1.5 at 70 and 1 at 60. All right? So I would, rather than letting go of this, I would like staff to come back to the next meeting with data on the tiered system without decreasing points. And then secondly, I'm open to looking at what Director Williams is suggesting. Certainly there can be data again by the next meeting of what it looks like to do things county by county. So I'm not ready to support action to just eliminate this until next year, because at the very least we should be doing no harm. And I don't see, I'm not ready to vote to give up on correcting or adjusting for the sake of schools like Morenci. I'm open to looking at other options.
So President Narducci, just to clarify Member Baker's comments, Member Baker, looking at a tiered system for that 1-point tier, would it be 60 to 69%? Tier 2 being 1.5 points would be 70 to 79, and 2 full points would be 80 to 100 of the state average.
That would work, or some other. I'm not. It doesn't have to be that. The key issue is that a school that's doing 80% should not receive less than 2 points. In other words, we shouldn't move backwards. That was never the intent.
Thank you, Member Baker. Member Welborn.
President Narducci, members of the board, and Member Baker. So I think along with that information, it would be valuable to know what kind of distribution of special ed students we see among schools, point one, so that we have an understanding of the spectrum of schools that are meeting the state average and those that, what it looks like. But I also I don't want to lose track of the suggestion that we look at it at a county level. And the reason being is, per what you said, it really is about carrying the load that's relevant to your geography. Mm-hmm. And if there's a wide distribution, perhaps in urban areas, where you might see 20% SPED versus rural areas where it's 10%, that's a relevant difference. And in the example you state, this school might be carrying 98% of their local market, but because the local market isn't close to the state average, they're not earning their points. So I really think looking at it at a county level might be insightful.
Thank you, Member Welborn. So, looks like I actually laid out a motion. We don't have a motion. We have a couple of great points that were mentioned. If we table this, what happens?
President Narducci, you just need a motion to table until the next board meeting, followed by a second and a vote to table.
I just was wondering, is there anything negative that happens between now and then because we're tabling it?
I would say it's a bonus point, so I think some of the other actions that the board did today are a little bit more within the accountability system indicators as themselves, which are important for schools. Not saying special ed bonus points are not important, but I think that it would be appropriate if you table it for a month. That's okay. It's still within my timeline in my head for all of you. So.
And then thank you. And then with respect to the discussion that has what's on the agenda then for this furthering this, what are we doing?
Sure. So President Narducci, members of the board, what I heard through the conversation is looking at the tiered system, making sure we have the numbers correct with the modeling. We looked. Member Welborn was bringing up the county averages. I'm not sure if county averages would be able to be studied before the February meeting. But I think it's one of those like longer term projects for the board and really shifting special ed bonus points. But we can see what we can get done between now and the February board meeting. And then lastly, Member Welborn was asking for the spectrum of the special ed population and where those students were located.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments in this regard or suggestions? Do I have a motion to table the special education bonus point item?
So moved.
And do I have a second? Second. And that motion is to table it until the February 20, the next board meeting, correct? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Someone go off the phone.
I believe Member
Okay, thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it, thank you. I believe that, oh, now we're at 6B. Do we want to take a quick break?
Yes.
Okay, let's do a 10-minute break. It is 11:35, we'll reconvene at 11:45. Thank you.
Member Ruiz is on the phone, but we still have Member Broussard on the phone, so we have a quorum, so we can get started.
What'd you say? So we're good? All
Yes,
right.
we're good. Just for the record, just for the record, Member K had to get off the line at 10:31, and Superintendent Hoffman had to leave at 11:42. So Member Broussard is the only other board member that is still on the phone line.
Thank you, but we do have a quorum, so we can okay, so the meeting starts up again at
Yes.
11:47. And we'll move on with item number 6B, Director Williams.
Members of the board, 6B is a presentation discussion and to take action to direct board staff to release a survey on the Arizona Online Instruction Accountability Plan. If you recall, back in 2017, the board initially looked at building an accountability system for AOI schools. That included a different FAE definition, and the department through their ATAC, and we invited some AOI schools to partake in that ATAC meeting. They discussed keeping that different FAE definition, but also looking at an online program exemption. So a lot of the AOI is unknown for us as staffers and ATAC. And so through this survey and this research that we're going to do through this spring, we're going to ask those AOI schools to submit data. We'll run the data that we have at the Department of Education and be able to bring back a plan for this board to vote upon to go into effect for the 2021 school year. So at this point, the action that we're looking at is to direct staff to release a survey on the draft AOI accountability plan.
Thank you, Director Williams. Any comment or questions? Do I have a motion to direct staff to release a survey on the draft AOI accountability plan?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 6C, Director Williams.
President Narducci, just real quick. Member K, are you back on the line?
Jill's on the line, right?
Yeah, there were two votes in that, so I was
there were two
just
ayes.
double checking. I think Member Broussard just didn't think we heard her the first time, so. All right, moving ahead, members of the board. Item 6C is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking procedures on R7-2-604.03 alternative educator prep program approval process. So the current process is that this board has an alternative ed prep committee made up of individuals from the field, just lay individuals from the field who go through these massive applications for alternative EPPs. This function used to sit with the Department of Education. The Department of Education is willing to take back that role for these alt EPPs. So Deputy Director Baden and members of the certification unit at the Department of Education sat down and updated some rules. We are looking for you to open rulemaking to move the alternative prep committee evaluation back over to the department.
Thank you, Director Williams. Any questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, do I have a motion to open rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2-604.03 Alternative Educator Preparation Program Approval Process?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes. Thank you. Move on to 6D. Director Williams.
President Narducci, 6D is information only. It's an update on rulemaking procedures for R7-2-615.01 special education endorsement. If no members of the board have any questions, then I would suggest moving on to the next item.
I do. Could you just do me a favor and just explain what this does?
Sure.
Thank you. I know, I caught you off guard.
You see
Sorry.
the names at the bottom of this, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being quizzed. Okay, so President Narducci, members of the board, the proposed rule creates a 3-year, non-renewable, provisional special education endorsement and a standard full special education endorsement. Both endorsements require an underlying standard teaching certificate and 3 years of full-time teaching experience. The provisional endorsement requires 6 semester hours of coursework in outlined topics and 15 clock hours of practicum. The full endorsement requires 15 semester hours of coursework and 45 hours of practicum.
Thank you.
So really,
the reason I asked Director Williams was because I was working on my master's in special ed before I went to law school. I just wanted to hear what it was.
Are you asking me?
All right.
Are you asking me if you are?
Could I get certified? I can have 6 years of experience.
I'll send an email to the certification desk.
All right, let AD know. And then we'll
President Narducci, you're hired.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? Do I have a motion? Oh, this is just items, so we're good. Ready for discussion.
Just
We'll move
update.
on to 6E. Thank you.
Members of the board, item 6E is an update on the rulemaking procedures for Article 10 and Article 11 of school district procurement. Now, before President Narducci asks me to explain this one, I will say that although the State Board of Education and its staff are the conduit in which this goes through, this has been worked on with the Assistant Attorney General's office and the Auditor General's office, so it's still with them, hence a lot of the green language. So I would suggest if you have any questions or concerns, let us know. But board staff is very limited in this scope because it is very large and very legal.
Thank you. We good with that one? Move on to 6F. Director Williams.
President Narducci, members of the board, item 6F is a presentation and discussion, possible action to close rulemaking procedures on R7-2-619 renewal requirements. This does 2 things. One, it allows for national board certified teachers to use a valid certificate. The applicants for National Board Certification may use their hours completed as part of the National Board Certification process. They're able to use those hours as continuing education credits that are required for renewal of their Arizona teaching certificate. It also allows, Superintendent Hoffman actually received feedback for the certificate of clinical competence in speech pathology from the American Speech Language Hearing Association. This is also setting that up as an option for renewal for those educators as well. You are being asked to close rulemaking, at which point this would go into effect.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Director Williams? Do I have a motion to close rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2-619 renewal requirements?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. G, Director Williams.
President Narducci, members of the board staff is closely following the legislative session this year. There are numerous education bills, many bills that the State Board of Education is named in. As staff, we're not ready to bring you a bill or an agenda item in which we need the full board to support or oppose. Just know that every week, board staff meets with President Narducci, Vice President Kaur, and Member Burton to discuss the current bills that are being heard in the House and the Senate. I will say the board's Senate bill sponsored by Senator Kate Brophy-McGee on educator discipline did pass a 9-0 vote, so that's very exciting. The House version of that bill sponsored by Representative Udall will be going before the House Education Committee in the next couple weeks. And we'll keep you posted weekly as we typically do. Anything comes up, or if you have any questions, or if legislators reach out to you or staffers reach out to you, please let us know, and we will be more than happy to assist you.
Thank you, Director Williams. And if there's any bills that any board member is concerned with, that they're aware of even right now, you can tell Director Williams and they can follow through on that, not have discussion, but follow up, or afterwards just let them know and they can follow through, and we'll make sure that we monitor those and see where we need to go.
President Narducci?
Yes.
Can I make a comment on the legislative issue, please? President Narducci, members of the board, I'd just like to ask board members to consider supporting the governor's Project Rocket proposal, which is essentially to provide additional funding for schools serving high poverty who are not getting results-based funding. And the critical nature of this proposal is that it recognizes the reality that educating kids in poverty does require additional resources and additional money. And the way our current system is set up, and those of us sitting here at the table are deeply involved in it, we are involved in a system that provides carrots and sticks in terms of grades performance. And I support that approach, but that alone is not the answer, because it assumes that no matter what your student population is, if there's a big enough carrot or there's a big enough stick, academic improvement is going to occur. The reality is that schools serving kids in high poverty have an additional burden to deal with. They have heavier lifting to do, and we as a state need to recognize that and provide them with additional funding.
Thank you, Member Baker. We will move on to, that wasn't a motion, that was just information.
Yes.
Item 6H.
President Narducci, members of the board, item 6H is to approve and extend, is an approval to extend and release a menu of assessments request for proposal. If you recall, last year we put out the RFP for this current school year. We have almost 75% of all 11th graders taking a assessment off the menu of assessments. I'm trying not to say vendor names. And so we need to put another RFP out. We need to extend that contract for next school year so that our 11th graders can select an assessment and take that statewide assessment, or take that assessment in 11th grade. So this is what this agenda item is asking for you to do through your motion. I don't think we need to go into an executive session, but if you do wish to discuss this item, we will have to go into executive session.
So basically, we're just going out there for an RFP for third-party vendors.
You're just extending.
Extending it, yeah, what we did before. All right, any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to direct ADE to release the same RFP used in 2019 for the high school menu of assessments and extend the current contracts with vendors for the 2020 to 2021 school year?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. We will move on to item 7, which is a call to the public to comment on items on the consent portion of the certification enforcement actions. Do we have any requests to speak?
President
We have no requests to speak on item 7, so we'll move on to item 8, which is the consent agenda for certification enforcement actions. This will be taken in a single motion, unless I have anybody who wants to remove anything. Seeing none, Do I have a motion to approve items 8A1 through 8A11 and item 8B1?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move on to item 9. This is time for public comment on items that are on the general session of the Certification Enforcement Action agenda. We do not have any comments, so we will move on to item 10A, 1 through 6. These are the negotiated settlement agreements. I can take these in a single motion if in fact there is no discussion or comment. Seeing none, I would like to take these in a single motion. For the record, items 10A4 was removed from today's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve items 10A1, 10A2, 10A3, 10A5, and 10A6? We have a motion. I have a second.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And we'll move on to item 10B1. So before we have to take these separately? I'll
Yeah.
take them separately.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take them separately. Item 10B1 is with respect to the PPAC's findings regarding Chad Badinger. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation of the PPAC and suspend any and all teaching certificates held by Chad Badinger for a period of 6 months with the condition that Mr. Badinger also complete a board-approved alcohol treatment and counseling program before being reinstated, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 10B2 deals with the Professional Practices Advisory Committee's actions with Joseph Berry. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by Joseph Berry for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 10B3, regarding the PPAC's assessment with respect to Brian Sharp. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by Brian Sharp for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And before I go on to item 10B4, I just want to compliment the PPAC on the fine job that they're doing.
Yep.
Item 10B4, with respect to the assessment regarding Brooke Spittle. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by Brooke Spittle for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Was Member Burton? Yes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move down to item 10B5 regarding the action pertaining to Shaney Stewart. Do I have a motion to adopt the finding of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by Shaney Stewart for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 10B6, with respect to the actions taken with Christopher Swank. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by Christopher Swank for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So,
Motion by Member Burton. Do I have a second?
second.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 10B7, with respect to the actions taken with John Van Huss. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by John Van Huss for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second by either Member Burton or we'll do a Member Baker. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Item 10C is a discussion regarding the certification of Troy Dorsey. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and deny the application for certification of Troy Dorsey for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. That was a lot of work. Good decision. Good assessments. Item 11, Director Williams, summary of current events in the world, here and everywhere else. In 2 minutes.
Okay, just in general, just any topic?
Any topic.
President Arducci, members of the board, board staff is working on the bill language for Project Rocket, so when we have a bill, we will more than likely put it on a board's agenda. Seeing that it does, the concept from the governor's office does involve the State Board of Education. So I would also like to publicly commend the PPAC, the Professional Practice Advisory Committee, as well as Kim Anderson and Harrington, Kathleen Harrington, as well as Garnett Burns and Chief Investigator David Spellage for their hard work. As we can see, we have been having numerous educator discipline cases on our board agendas, and that is no easy lift. It is very difficult and hard to make sure that we're protecting students. I'm so thankful that this meeting in Yuma, so thank you to Ashley, Dr. Court's Chief of Staff, and the staff at Arizona Western, and Dr. Kaur for having us. I couldn't catch it in the beginning, but this is, you may have said it, it's the first time in 10 years that we've been out of Maricopa County for the state board. Wow. So, I mean, it's been a while. And our second will be in Flagstaff in August. So, for a regular meeting, yeah, it's good. With that, board staff is just working really hard with the legislative session and educator discipline and board things. So, any board members have questions?
Thank you, Director Williams. And Dr. Kaur.
Thank you, President Narducci. I just wanted to let folks know once again just how thrilled we are that you've taken time to join us here in Yuma, and certainly want to invite you to stay and for a little bit and witness what we believe to be unique to Yuma, in that at our regularly scheduled monthly, what we call the SUPS meeting, but it's much more than the superintendents. Every superintendent in the county, along with representatives from all 3 state universities, our fantastic steady JTED, or CTED now, representatives from the Military Educational Office joins. We gather and talk about all things education in Yuma. And while you're here, we'd love to extend an invitation for you to stay with us for lunch. Obviously, no board action to be taken, but just learn a little bit about what we've entitled the Yuma Magic. So I'm hopeful that you can all stay for a quick bite and informal presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for traveling down. Thanks for attending our meeting. And with that said, I believe we are adjourned.
Nice. Bam.